Hello, social media. So we're on episode 60 of Bottoms Up Perspective, and we're super excited for tonight's episode. We can talk about finding your voice, right? What does that look like when it comes to East and the West, and what does a voice mean, right? And we have our special guest tonight, JuHee Kim, and she's the former managing director at VaynerMedia in Los Angeles, and she also worked for Disney and some other corporations. And we thought she would be the perfect guest, being a woman and of Asian descent. The challenges of finding your voice, right? So let's go ahead and start. I'll let you introduce yourself too. So,
oh, okay,
yeah.
Great. Well, as Kim said, I'm JuHee Kim. I'm coming to you from the West Coast, Los Angeles to be specific. And as he mentioned, I was the managing director at VaynerMedia. I was running the West Coast office here in Los Angeles. And prior to running the VaynerMedia LA office, I spent many years as a studio executive, working inside of Disney, NBC Universal, as well as Fox.
Wow.
And I also spent a fair amount of time as a global agency leader, working inside of Omnicom, Publicis, Dentsu, all of the major holding companies. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm looking forward to the chat.
Awesome.
Wow.
And I don't know, there is a feed for some reason, so maybe one of us, might need to mute during. I'm not sure. So
I hope it's not me.
no, I'm not sure where it's coming from, but so let's get started. So I want to talk about tonight, right? When it comes to a voice, and this can be very conversational. Let's start there. Let's start with the East real quick. Do Asians tend to have a voice, or in the East, in like Asia, are people very outspoken at work, in corporation, on social media, online?
No. Quick answer, no. I mean, even just for myself, right? I only started trying to get a voice, throw my voice out there on LinkedIn, probably only a bit about, 2 or 3 years ago. So prior to that, I've just been trying to fly under the radar. So no. Long story short, no. At least that's my experience.
I concur. I think most Asians are. I would like to say that they are quiet, and but it goes beyond being quiet. We just want to, in a way that we keep to ourselves. I think it's a lot more to do with I don't want to embarrass myself, or I don't want to be in the spotlight, or I just want to finish my stuff and go home. I'm not here to do anything else. So that's how I think about it. So we do have a voice, we just don't project it. That's how I think about it. And whether it's on social media, whether it's on live stream, it's difficult. It's difficult to get people to articulate their thoughts the moment there's a camera. I don't know why. Seriously, it beats me, but that's what I'm thinking. What
do you feel is the reason why Asians, because we're, everyone's an Asian except Jen here. So why do you feel we try to just kind of, I like what Jeremy said, a lot of Asians, we kind of just stay under the radar. So what's the reason for that?
I don't know. It's maybe, self-doubt, embarrassment is the face thing. And there isn't really a need to, I guess. It's no compelling reason to want to do that for the majority. And we're just more, culturally speaking, right, more compliant, more, kind of like the herd mentality thing. The only thing you want to stand out is really, when you have good grades, that one you want to stand out. But apart from that, you don't really want to, throw yourself out there, be on a stage, speak, go on live like this, put yourself out in social media. Yeah, probably no.
Would you say, Jeremy, that's not encouraged from the top down, like from the government down? Or would you say it's part of the educational system, or also maybe the parenting? Like, just do as you're told, just do as you're told. And I think in the schools as well, if you speak up against a teacher, I know my mother-in-law was very scared of the teacher. And so for her to see our kids have such a loving relationship with their teacher, she's just like, it's so different here. It's so different here. So I was just curious of how you feel those play a part in the East.
I think definitely education plays a part, at least for my generation, right? So that's like 4 or 5 decades ago. We're more I wouldn't say that currently not that the younger generation is not respectful of elders, but we just have more respect for that power and authority. Whereas in these days, it's more of a collaborative, hey, I'm your buddy kind of a relationship with the teacher. So the authoritative figure is probably not so much there. And yeah, I think that plays a part, a lot in the part. And yeah, we don't, I mean, even in the house and the family, really, the parents most of the time, talking, kids mind their own business kind of thing. I guess all those play a part. Government-wise, I'm not sure. I won't comment on that. Especially coming from Singapore, I'm not going to comment. I'll drink.
That's fine.
Anyone could be watching, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And I think that the cultural element is that the collective is above the individual.
That's right.
Then the thing is, when you do that, then basically you will tend to check the environment before you be yourself. And what that means is instinctively you become part of the environment. I give it a description. It's called wallflower or wallpaper. You blend in. I mean, it's very natural to blend in. And therefore, it's very difficult to want to stand out. It's very difficult because you're fighting against yourself. And I think a lot of people are grappling with that. Like, I find it very difficult. Of course, you find it very difficult because you keep checking. So that's how I think about it. I think the best way to have a voice and to project it and to stand out is for Asians, don't check the environment first. Do it, check later. Because it's difficult. If you're always checking your level of coherence with the environment that you're in, then you will always be part of the environment. I mean, you'll blend in. That's my point. So I don't know when this collective thing is going to go away. I doubt, because it's been with the Chinese for 5,000 years or something, and it's still here. It's my point. So I think there's a lot of good just trying to learn the elements of individualism from the geographical or ideological West, so to speak, for ourselves, maybe just for a couple of hours for ourselves, and then you can continue to blend in. I mean, just don't blend in completely, then you lose yourself. That's just my point. And I think it's actually pretty sad.
And I think from an Asian American perspective, being here in the West, right, I think a lot of our culture comes in our homes, right? If you're first generation, your parents still have that ideology and that's how they think. So you're taught to, hey, let's be that model minority. Let's not cause too much trouble and let's just work really hard. Even myself, when I first started my corporate experience, it was always, you just work really hard. You climb that corporate ladder, keep to yourself, and don't cause trouble. But I think now, with everything that's going on with Asian hate and different things, I think Asians are starting to learn that, hey, we need to have a voice. It's okay to have a voice. And the people that are younger, they're more open about it, So I want to hear from JuHee. So with you being in different corporations, everything from Disney to VaynerMedia, you working your way to become a managing director in a pretty well-known, a digital marketing agency, I would say. under someone that has a very loud voice, you know. What was your experience and how you got there? What was your journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's, you know, I was listening to Jeremy and Aldrich share sort of, right, the experience in the East and how much cultural norms drive, right, the ability to, right, express one's voice or not. I have to say, having grown up in the West, albeit with, right, with Korean parents who grew up in Korea, and I'm first generation. I was born in Korea. I came here young. The experience is not that dissimilar. Because I was raised in my household with my parents who grew up in a very different culture. So those things that are inherently American, right? And Aldrich touched on this: individualism, you know, freedom of expression, you know, and in our world, from a marketing standpoint, right? Like we have, you know, brand leaders building their own personal brand and getting out on big stages, right? And that's just not a part of whether you're in the East or the West, and maybe it'll be different for my son's generation. That level of exhibitionism, of self-aggrandizement, that's just not a part of my DNA. And frankly, I don't think it's a part of the DNA of most Asian leaders, or, you know, Asian Americans for that matter. And listen, I don't want to speak for all Asian Americans. I'm talking, you know, very much through the lens of my own personal experience. But, you know, finding my voice in business has been a process, and also very situational. And I think your voice and expression of your voice is much easier in environments that feel safe to you, where you don't feel so othered, if you will. And, you know, your voice becomes, right, you know, less, right, less than when you enter into cultures and environments where it's clear that, you know, the culture does not want to hear from you. So I've experienced, you know, it's on a continuum. I've experienced cultures and organizations where I felt so safe, where the purest expression, the most authentic expression of my voice, right, has been, you know, appreciated. And I've lived inside of orgs and cultures and with bosses where that was just, you know, not encouraged. And so I think, you know, it's so layered. It's cultural, it's steeped in us as others, it's situational depending on, right, the culture and organization that you're in. And so it is a process.
I would like to hear from you, JuHee, right? Other than all the situation or your bosses and different organizations, has it always been in you, or do you have to make the switch from bringing more of you know, collectivism kind of a cultural background to having your individual voice? What has it been like for you personally?
Yeah, it's really interesting because my father, you know, my God, his gray hairs would attest to this. You know, he had the fortune or misfortune of actually bringing up three very outspoken, rebellious girls. And so, you know, and so I've always had a very good sense of voice, as, you know, personally. What was interesting is in coming up in business, you know, the voice then becomes tempered and mitigated, right? Because, you know, in order to succeed or excel, you start to mitigate speech, right, based on the environment that you're in. And then you start to, you know, I'll give you an example. You know, I've been called a chameleon in my career. And I don't, you know, I had a peer actually say this to me. You know, we were casting for, you know, a business meeting, and, you know, she said to me, "You're perfect because you can adapt and morph in any, in any sort of situation, in any sort of meeting. And I didn't know whether to be, I didn't know whether to be or
Oh, compliment.
or complimented. But I think, it dawned on me, we here start to adapt and fit in, right? And as Asian Americans, and you do it unconsciously. It wasn't even a conscious thing that I was doing. And then you also start to model behaviors, right, inside of these organizations and cultures. And, the good news about all of these conversations that we're having today is that we're all taking a long, hard look, right, at what it means to be Asian American in business, in the world today, and really sort of checking ourselves to understand, like, where are we, right, on the spectrum in terms of our identity.
That's so good, because I think it's so true too. And it goes back to what Eldrick and Jeremy said. In a way, we're like wallpaper, right?
Yeah.
Because we're raised that way too. And I don't think it's just because we're in America, because I'm like you, I came here when I was 6, right? But my parents are still, they eat Chinese food. They speak Chinese at home. They're very much raised us as Chinese people, so my mindset growing up is still very Asian, but at the same time, I have to fit in, especially when I'm in the Midwest. It's almost survival. So as a child, you're the only one that's a minority. You're the only one that's different. So you naturally start trying to blend in. You go play sports because that's what people do. You learn to watch sports because that's what majority of Americans do when they're going through the school system. And then all of a sudden you grow up and you go into the corporate world. And once again, majority of your hierarchy, your management, your C-levels, they're Caucasians,
That's right.
And even during school, your professors, different things. So you just learn to adapt. And
Right.
and that's a good, chameleon is a good word in a way, because Asians, I don't know from our audience if you guys watch Korean drama or any of the Chinese series, right? It'll kind of give you an idea about Asian culture, because there's a lot more depth in Asian culture, I think. Example, I think, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, for Caucasians, it's more about expressing yourself, your feelings, right? So if you watch Korean drama, Chinese drama, they might have a feeling, but it's all hidden behind closed doors. And, so eventually it either blows out or something happens, right? Or they just keep quiet, but it's all either when they go home to their husband or wife, or, with their friends, but it's often not spoken.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it causes people to think, oh, they're being a chameleon, or maybe this and that. And it isn't true,
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think you're right, Kevin. I mean, for those of us who are just other, right? And if you grow up at being, the only Asian in your community, and it sounds like that's what it was like for you. And for the most part, I grew up sort of, right, with very few Asians through school, and it changed obviously when I went to high school and college and university. But I think you quickly learn, even as a child. I mean, I came here when I was 4. My parents, share stories with me. They said, it was remarkable to them how quickly I picked up the English language, because it was not my first language. But, and I jokingly said to them, well, it was survival, right? I mean, instinctively as a child, I clearly understood that I needed to learn the language of the new country I was in. And then from there, I think it is, that sense of wanting to fit in. That's a very basic human instinct as well, right? it's not merely survival because we look different or we are different or perceived different, but it is a very human, basic instinct to just want to fit in, right? Yep. Like East or West, like whatever it is. And so in an effort to fit in, compounded with the fact that we were raised by Asian parents, right, whose values are not necessarily, Western values. Like that is a lot to unpack in a business environment and in a business culture where, a strong point of view and voice, right, is needed to succeed. So it's something, and frankly, even beyond the Asian American experience, I think I see a lot of young people entering the industry struggling to find their voice as well. So I think, not to overcomplicate things, and I told you guys I'd go down rabbit holes, but I think I think it also has a lot to do with confidence, self-esteem, right? And also, for us as business leaders, creating much safer environments for people to express their voice.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how would you say, so throughout your journey, right, your corporate experience and everything, do you feel that being both a woman and an Asian has affected, is it a little more challenging?
Yeah, I mean, it clearly has. And, and when I say this year has been sort of like, coming off of 2020 was horrible, right? And coming up with that kind of year, if, a lot of, if you're not self-reflecting and taking, right, a good hard look at where you are in your life and what it all means, like, I don't know, but 2020 has been an interesting year coming into 2021 because, so much has been going on in our culture politically, and with the pandemic. I'm asking myself those questions. I'm taking a long, hard look back, and it's very clear that being a woman of color, I have a very different experience than non-women of color. And, like you and like Aldrich and Jeremy, a lot of the career was built on put your head down, work harder than anyone else, build a high level of competence, right? And quietly build your reputation. And I did that for 20 years now. And I think to myself, well, and in looking back retrospectively at the past 20 years, I think to myself, well, God, like that wasn't the most amazing or easy experience. That was a tough 20 years to get to where I am. There were no advantages. There were no, handouts or, let me lend you a hand. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had some really great people in my life who have been encouraging and supportive. But, to say that the past 20 years has been easy, not true. Not true.
That's so good. So what would you say, why should we have a voice? What difference does a voice make? And that's to all of you, right? Well, why do you think that every human being should own their voice and should be vocal and should speak up?
Can I just go quickly first on this? I think I think I mentioned this before, and I've always spoken about this theory to people, right? I guess this is quite true for big companies and MNCs. So if you go by a 2x2 grid, 2x2 grid, you have a voice, you don't have a voice, you can work and you can't work. If you go by these 4 boxes, I think it makes sense that if you you're competent, you can work, and you can talk at the same time. You have an own voice. You have your own voice. You're going to go far in life. You're going to go far in your career. I believe in that very strongly. But if you look at the other 3 dimensions, if you can't really talk, you don't have a voice, and you're not competent, that's it. You're done. You better do something about that, right? And if you look at the other 2 dimensions, the other 2 boxes, you have a voice, but you can't really work. Maybe you'll survive a while in those big corporation situations, right? 1 or 2 years before you get exposed that you really can't do work. Or to compensate that, to mitigate that, you have somebody in your organization who reports to you that works really well, and you have that voice to project to bring your department or whatever up. You can survive for a while, right? But if you can work really well, you're very competent, but you don't have a voice, you're going to take a long time before you get to, get recognized, you get to somewhere up there, or you might not be recognized ever at all. You'll just be seen as a good worker, diligent, competent, but you're not going to move up the corporate ladder. That is at least how I see it in a very simple way, 2x2 box, matrix grid kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know what you guys think about that or agree to that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, Jeremy, especially in business, right? To not have a voice is to not have a seat at the table, and right, to not be perceived as a future leader, as a leader inside of the org, someone without a point of view. And so, yeah, and those traits are very are rewarded in business culture. And so, yeah, it's critical if from a growth standpoint and climbing the ladder, if you will. For me, like I said, I've always had a point of view. I've always had no issue expressing my voice. I would love in the next stage of my career to be able to be authentic in my voice. Right? And not have to play the role of chameleon, to
blend
fit into a culture. I would love to bring more of me, the authentic me, into boardrooms, versus curtailed and mitigated, right? And refined to the point of, because I think once we find, and I don't mean to get on a soapbox, and by all means, I don't profess to be an expert on any of this, but I think that's our superpower. I think when we can all sort of come to the table, our most authentic selves, I mean, that's when I feel the most powerful in a room, right? Because you can back it up with, right? And I love Jeremy's note about getting found out if all it is voice and zero confidence, because we've run into many of those people. Right?
Yep, there's a lot.
There's a lot of that succeeding up. But for me, it's just, if you can marry experience and competence and your authentic voice, I mean, that's when it's the most fun for me. That's when, that's when the work, doesn't feel like work anymore.
And I think I feel that's a big part of Asian culture too, though, even with the parenting, right? They're always say, hey, if you want to voice your opinion, voice something, you better back it up. We're not rewarded for voicing just to voice, So, and I think that's part of the reason why, education was so big growing up, and making sure that, hey, if you go say something, then, hey, what's the reasoning behind it, right? And I think we're raised in a culture kind of like, hey, don't just speak, but be careful what you say, because your words make a huge difference and an impact. So.
Sorry, I've got a weird sun glare coming from where I am.
Aldrich, Jen, your thoughts?
Jen, you want to go first? Okay, I'll go first. I think the question is, why is it important to have a voice? I think there are multiple parts to that question. So internal, external. First, I think as a philosophy of life and existence, we are living our own life. And one of the ways in which we know that we are contributing to the people around us, the tribe, or the universe is when we have something to contribute. And when you think about having a voice in that manner, then obviously parroting is not the way to go, because then you're not contributing at all. I mean, like, what exactly are you contributing if I'm just repeating word for word in terms of what JuHee is saying or in terms of what Jeremy is saying? So that can't be the way. What we have discussed so far is our response to the external environment and whether we have the guts or the confidence to say, I'm going to say it. You know, I'm going to say that. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to say it. And I think that you're crap, you know. And then why, right? I might not be right. And the whole point about this is that we will never be right entirely or completely, but we will learn something along the way. And I think that is the most difficult message that we can all embrace, because we don't like the feeling of being wrong, not so much about being right. Because the moment we get to that paradigm, then we put ourselves at risk of being wrong or offending the counterparty. And I think that is a terrible paradigm to be in, because it's a zero-sum game. It's either you win or I lose. And I hate it. And I don't think that's the way. Now, why an inner voice is important, it points me to one story. If we all remember, I don't know why it's a fairy tale, but if you remember the ugly duckling, I think that's a brilliant story for this context. The ugly duckling it's obviously uncomfortable as a duckling, because everyone else looks the same and he's not. But the point of epiphany will come as to all of us, just like the duckling, where he looks into the water and realizes that he's not a duckling. We need to get to that point that I am now confident and mature enough of myself that I'm going to say what I think. And for most of us, this journey takes years. It takes years. I think I'll draw an allusion to what JuHee has mentioned. 20 years of grind to find a voice. That voice is worthy of protracting. It's worthy because it took us so long to get there. So obviously, mired with our opinions, our life experience, and our professional interactions with so many people, we have something to share now. And so we should. So that's what I think why we need to have a voice of sorts. Really altruistically, but obviously I'm not an altruistic person, but you have something to share and contribute no matter how small. But most importantly, when you speak your mind, when you have something to contribute, you find your existence in life. You're no longer living somebody else's life. That, to me, is very important.
That's so good. I really like what you said, Aldrich, is when you have a voice, you're no longer living as a shadow under someone else's life. And I think a lot of times it's not just, you know, in the corporate world, but also underneath our parents. You know, there comes a time when you're grown up, you're an adult, you know, so you need to find your own voice. And what does that voice look like? And we need to learn to speak up. So, and stand up on what we believe and be our authentic self and put ourselves out there so we're vulnerable. And I think it's hard to do because then, you know, you have judgment, you know, from everyone else. And nowadays, everything's amplified 100 times because you have these social media platforms and you have a lot of voices, right? In the midst of all these voices, you know, how do you become the voice? And I think it's like JuHee said, you have to be authentic.
Yeah.
I really,
Go ahead, Jen.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, once, and listen, I've experienced this, quite a bit. Once you have the courage to, as Aldrich said, right, not parrot back, right, the sort of like the thinking of the group. I think you also need to brace yourself for, right, for the implications ultimately, right? Because I have oftentimes been the person in the boardroom, that my, colleagues are sort of, and I have a reputation for this over the years, where my colleagues are sort of nudging me, right? She'll say it, she'll eat it, and there can be at times consequences, but there is, but once you get the first, right, at bat, there's immense power in not being afraid to raise your hand and challenging the status quo and not taking on, right, the group point of view. I've derived those acts, right, to be extremely empowering for me. And over time, those acts become who you are. They become your reputation. And I'd rather be known as fearless, with the loud voice than, to Aldrich's point, the parrot in the room.
The parrot is loud too, right? you find it annoying.
Yes. There are many parrots in the room, Aldrich. Right?
Many.
And I know you are at the table rolling your eyes. Asking yourself, why is this person saying the exact same thing we just heard?
Ooh, that's so good.
I think there's a way. I love what JuHee said about like finding your authentic voice, because Kevin and I know, the core team here at Bottoms Up, we're also really about creating that space for people to be their authentic self. And I know, but I kind of like both. I think there's a place for the chameleon too. And I think both of them can be married together. It's just knowing how to do that. It's being your strong self, but still able to make other people around you. Like, for example, JuHee, I can imagine you, if you walk into the conference room, you know how to make everybody feel comfortable in the room, like comfortable with you being there, comfortable with what's going on, but still allowing for that individuality. So I feel like there's really a place, if it could come into balance, of having that thinking that could think about the collective, but also keep the individuality. So like, if you don't agree with something, yeah, you can say, I don't agree, but everybody, you've already created that comfort for people to be authentically themselves. I don't know if that makes sense. In my mind, it made perfect sense, but I think there's actually a place for both, because you do have to be considerate of others. You, like in cells, you do want to sometimes watch people and observe them and to some degree reflect them in order to make a cell. So I feel like it's kind of the same way. There is some chameleon going on, because you don't want to rub people the wrong way when you're getting ready to present to them, or when you're getting ready to work together as a team, really draw out their personal thoughts and ideas and opinions. So yeah, I really feel that both are important. You don't want to lose the individuality in the overall, but you also have to have that collective thinking. And I feel like that is speaking as far as the West is concerned, we really lack in that. We really lack in that, at least overall as a culture. And so there's a place for that, like living, even though I'm not born Asian, living in an Asian family and adapting to that, accepting a lot of those things, the values and traditions and different things that I've learned from being married to Kevin. I value those things, and I see a place for them, and I see where they lack from our side, and I think that it could go both ways. So if there's a way that you could find that middle ground and marry that, all the best of both together, it's ideal.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Jen, I was gonna say you make complete sense, and you sound very Asian in that way, because like what Kevin mentioned, right? Like what Kevin mentioned about watching Chinese drama or Korean drama, what is not said in the Asian culture is important. What is not said. I mentioned this before, I think previously. So you really need to detect what is not said. You whatever visual cues or whatever you have, and you can find the voice of other people when you pull them out after the meeting or whatever and ask, hey, I felt that you were holding back, or you didn't look very comfortable in this discussion. Was there something you wanted to share but you do not want to in the group? And that's where you get people's voice coming to you in their most authentic manner on what they're thinking. Not and because they didn't say it at the meeting doesn't mean that they don't have a voice. They might have an opinion, but they just are regulating themselves or suppressing their thoughts, or just trying to fly under the radar. But it's up to you to detect that and let them have their voice, because those perspectives could be very useful. And if you miss those, then you might be in for some trouble or some surprises along the way. So I totally agree that not having a voice in a certain environment doesn't mean that they don't have a voice, but you really need to dig deeper, and that's where you find some truth in what you're trying to figure out.
So before we end tonight, so I want to hear from what are your thoughts on, so for someone that's uncomfortable with themselves, with their authentic self, or what it means to have a voice in this digital age, right? Well, you have, people go live, you have social media, you got Gary Vaynerchuk that says, hey, you just be everywhere, be outspoken, say it like it is. There's a lot of younger generation, and JuHee knows, she worked for Vayner, that just believes in it, that's their thought, so a lot of Gen Zs are now speaking up. They're on social media, Instagram, everything. So for someone who's maybe even older or a little more from a different generation, or a little uncomfortable with these platforms, how can you get comfortable? How can you really be your authentic self? Because a lot of people talk about authentic self, but what does authentic self really mean? Is it, let's put out all our dirty laundry? And JuHee being a managing director in the marketing world. Okay, let's get specific here. Is it talking about every single anxiety you have, every single thing that happens in your home? What does that look like? Because I even know personally, because I have a marketing background, I'm sure even Gary himself isn't probably throwing everything out there. And even other influencers, not just Gary, but there's a lot of them, Ty Lopez, all these guys, right? So love to hear from you guys, your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll kick it up. I'll say that there are certain things that I am not willing to do for success. One of those things is, like being, sharing all of that. I'm not interested in that personally. And it's just not, to your point about being my authentic self, it's not core to who I am. I have very little interest in becoming a marketing celebrity. I have very little interest in just creating a high volume of content for the sake of creating a high volume of content on behalf of myself. Again, I mean, but everyone's different. And so for me, there's a line, even if it means the end is, more success and what have you. For me, it's with my own dignity, integrity. Is much more valuable than all of that. And I think it's very complicated today right? Because we live in a very polarized culture.
Mm.
So, right. And so and you know, we live with social media. And so, and frankly, I don't think that all of that noise, right, is worth listening to. And so, you know, this wasn't really your question, but I think, you know, as to your point about, you know, the next generation coming up, I think you know, they should be really judicious about what they're sharing and ask themselves the question, you know, for what end, to what end, and how am I adding value to the discourse? What's the discourse we're having? Is it a valuable discourse? What am I adding to the discourse, right? Or am I simply just adding to the noise?
That's so good. No, that's really good. And I love it. So being a marketer, that's definitely, you know, I see the challenge and I see there's a lot of disconnect in what people think is authentic and being the way these influencers and people are portrayed. Is it real? You got to ask yourself that. And is it the be all for every business? It isn't, because I've seen business that thrive on relationships that they built without social media still till this day. And it's not the be all, it's not the ingredient to marketing, because there are so many aspects of marketing. And we're all marketers here on this call. You have to really evaluate the business and who you are, you know, and it's like JuHee said, you know, it could work for certain personalities and it might not, it could be detrimental to you because it might not be a fit, you know?
And if I could just add one thing, I think it's a disservice to generations coming up to preach to them from a pulpit, right? And enter into what I call false contracts with them, espousing values that you don't or can't live up to. Right? And so, and we see a lot of that happening in our industry and in culture today. And that's what I mean by being your authentic self. If that is not who you are, right? And you, like, there are other ways to succeed. There is great value in quietly and confidently building a career, right? And helping, and, you know, those coming up and being a mentor. There is tremendous value in that. There, right? And I think the scales have been tipped. And young people coming up in the industry today think that they need to do the showboating, or or the excessive communicating. And it's just, I would love to get back to a more balanced state.
That's so good.
Where we're deriving more meaning in our engagements and in our relationships and in our communication. So.
Very powerful message. I like that.
I would just like to say amen to that. It's all I need to say.
Because at the end,
we've overdosed on celebrity. It's too much. It's too much.
Yep. I mean, just look at the financial market. It's ridiculous. At the end of the day, you know, I think it's about heart. And we're all heart people here. I can speak for Eldrick, Jeremy, and Jen as well after doing 60 episodes of Bottoms Up. And it's about relationships. And I think now relationships have become a very surface level. It's very hard to measure. I was just talking to Jen, you know, my wife, like, it's kind of scary to raise a child in this day and age, because even just talking to them about, hey, what do you differentiate as real? We were talking today at the dinner table about conspiracy theories, right? To our 8-year-old, because he was arguing with us how, you know, Chuck E. Cheese is it was fried. What was it? What's the You're muted, Jen.
He said something about Freddie Fazbear used to be that, own that, and then it sold off to Chuck E. Cheese, and we're like, Freddie Fazbear is a character on a game or like a cartoon or
and
something.
he was explaining to us how these robots attack these people, so it ended up closing. And I'm like, where are you getting this from? So he was listening to something on YouTube. So he doesn't want to go he has a fear of going to Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh no.
Right.
And I was like,
that's actually better for the two of you.
I mean, yeah, I was like, it saves me money, but dude, like, where are you getting this stuff? And then we were having these conversations about what is that thing called that people, the Bigfoot. Bigfoot.
Oh, Bigfoot.
Yep.
Bigfoot.
He is unshakable. It is real. It's unshakable. I mean, we've talked it through, and I'm like, so there's only one on the earth, and we like went through the whole conversation, and he's like, but I just believe it. And I'm like, I'm leaving it. I'll just leave it right there right now.
but like the younger generation, they're so adapted to watching all this stuff on their tablets, So as parents, we're trying to differentiate, like, hey, you got to understand not everything on social media is real. Hey, dad works in this business, and you got to be careful what you believe and who said stuff. And it's funny because we're all laughing about it, but there's adults who buy this stuff as well, right? Every day we see it. They don't know what's manipulated content and what's going on in the media. And it's so confusing. There's so much going on. There's so much noise. There's almost too many voices,
So. Yeah, I mean, we were already as a culture over communicated to, and now it's just like exponentially. And so that, now I'm just sounding old, but I long for the day where we can just have, really good conversations, amazing dialogue with other human beings versus being reduced down to this, twitchy soundbitey culture. I just
it's almost
Meaningful.
like we have all the tools to be closer than ever, but we're more disconnected and divided. So
that's right.
So before we end tonight,
I have one comment.
Go ahead,
I just
Eldrick.
want to make one comment on top of what JuHee mentioned.
Perfect.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. In fact, I would rather interact with 100 people in a TED conference than to connect and comment on 1,000 followers on social media. Honestly,
Yeah.
I would rather do that. Does that mean that social media is on the sunset? I don't think so. No. But you use it for business purposes, I think that's fine. But to be overly engrossed and engaged in it, you just have to understand that this is a treadmill that doesn't end. So know when to hop off. That's what I'm saying. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we lack depth.
That's right.
These days. We lack depth. And it's wearing me down. Well, there are times, but...
Well, Kevin and I have noticed a lot lately through social media, because we have to be on there a lot, just how artificial it can be. Like, people can present whatever they want. And then the other thing that just amazes me is people that you would never think would say certain things will get on there because no one can see them, and they're just typing at on their phone or their home computer. So all of a sudden they can be rude, or they can say really awful things, and you're like, is that really what's in your heart? Like, I didn't have any idea that there's some really, really horrible, rude people out there. But they'll never say it to your face. They'll be friendly to your face, but on social media, they feel safe to say those kind of things. And it blows me away.
Yeah.
It really blows me away.
And beyond sort of the misinformation and disinformation, when Aldrich talks about depth, I mean, to me, that's the bigger fear. Are we raising a culture of people who can't think through the complexity of situations? right? Because, you know, things are abstract and gray, not black and white. And you know what it does is it's so reductive to good and bad, cancel, woke, and you know, a lot
So
of the
good.
things, a lot of the things that we're grappling with today, they are complex issues. They cannot be reduced down to a tweet exchange, post, right? Or a YouTube video. And so that's why I don't even bother to engage, frankly.
That's so good.
Isn't your explanation and your conclusion like too far?
Commit
Too
an
far?
hour to me where we can actually dig into the issue, I will not engage.
That's good. You save a lot of time that way, JuHee. I think that's
how
really
I
good.
am.
That's really good time management, actually.
That's where my Asian side comes in. I don't engage. So.
And yeah, he's not joking.
But you save a lot more time, and you know, I love genuine conversations that's real, that matters. And you know, and I'm so happy you came on our show and be able to have conversation with us. And that's why I was like, actually, we're just gonna talk. You know,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Even personally, I get so tired of the talking head, you know, shows. And when Eldrick, Jeremy, and we all got together, and Jen, we're like, how can we create a show where it's almost like happy hour. Let's act like the world's not there, and let's just talk. And it's just everyday people hopping on. I don't care if you have 30,000 followers or 2 followers. It's about, let's have conversation, because it's exactly like you said. I feel this industry lacks just talking. You know, everything is a facade. You know,
I don't think it is contained to this industry or any industries per se. I do think that by and large, depth is lacking in the way we think and the way we engage in conversations. I don't blame it on a fast food culture. I don't, but I do think that by and large, people entertain shortcuts a lot more than they should. But then again, this is my opinion, because a lot of truth in life, capital T, a lot of truth in life cannot be unfolded through shortcuts. It's not possible. It's not possible. So unless you are willing and able to engage in a conversation with an open mind and with depth, there's no way you can understand it at all. Because all simple messages are summarized messages of a complex issue. If you don't understand this, your summary is shaky at best and superficial at worst. I mean, that's my take about it. That's all.
This may not. I know Kevin needs to end, and this may not go along with what you were saying, Aldrich, like exactly. But like, I remember, I really blame it on social, and I do love social media. I enjoy it to some degree for personal reasons. I enjoy LinkedIn, but I remember, I'm 41, so I remember growing up as a young girl. There was no need to talk about having genuine conversations because everybody did it. So I never once growing up ever heard somebody give a speech about being authentic or having a genuine conversation, because you had to at least have some type of conversation. I mean, yeah, that just like your phone rang, you were so glad that somebody called you at home. That was cell phone. So I mean, I remember talking for hours to friends, or having friends come over and talking to hours, having a game night. So social media does really sometimes pull people together, and also can pull people apart from those genuine conversations. And that's why we have to discuss that now, because the generation growing up in the social media, they need to hear the older people saying, hey, it wasn't always, hey, this is what genuine conversation means. This is what being authentic means. So I love hearing JuHee and all of you guys talk about that, because you understand what it means before all of this. You understand what that authentic relationship looks like and what that authentic voice is and what it's supposed to be. And yeah.
So before we wrap this up, so I guess the key is unplug. It's like the
Except from
Matrix.
LinkedIn.
Every once in a while is okay to unplug, and all the influencers you love, all the people you follow, really think about what they're saying. Really listen, because I think sometimes we get so caught up into what someone says that we don't hear our own voice as well. We don't hear what's in our heart and what works for me, so you got to find what works for you. And there's no one, just like entrepreneurship or being a career journey, it's not the same. Just even with us five, right? We all took a different journey, a different path, and somehow we're okay. We're here, right? So just remember, as an audience, does it work for you? You have to find your own way, not someone else's way, because someone else's way only worked for that someone else. It doesn't mean it'll work for everyone. There's not a one size fits all to life, So life is a journey, and every day we got to find our voice. So thank you so much for being on our show tonight, and appreciate you, and we'll stay connected. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. And JuHee's going to have her cocktail.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.